I have been in theater, in Teatro, for 48 years. I started Teatro 2 years after it began. So, this year we're celebrating our 50th anniversary, or in 2022, actually, but we're starting now a 2-year celebration. So I started 2 years after it had started.
50 years, that's a big deal.
It is. I think, especially for the history of teatros, Chicano theater, the grandfather of all teatros is, of course, Teatro Campesino, and they have been in existence longer, much longer. And out of that birth, if you will, there were a lot of the teatros throughout the Southwest and Mexico and South America started. And in New York and East Coast, and we're one of the few that has continued. Yeah, there used to be quite a few teatros in Colorado, but
why do you think there aren't any more? That's probably a hard question.
for a lot of reasons. I think they grew up from the Chicano movement. A lot of people who were part of Teatro were students who were part of the university, and they graduated, they got jobs, they have families, responsibilities, and because the Teatro was more out of the colleges and university, they didn't sustain themselves outside. But Su Teatro, started at the university, University of Colorado at Denver, but we were also out in the community, and we had a lot of people that joined Teatro were members of the community and not necessarily the students. So we were able to survive just in that respect. We didn't depend on being part of that university and leaving after we graduate, So, yeah. And because, quite frankly, Tony Garcia, our artistic director, kept it alive, kept us going, and we all had a passion to keep it going.
You mentioned that you guys are out in the community, and I think for the types of plays that you do, that's important, but just tell me why that is.
At the beginning, it was very important because we grew out of the Chicano movement. And so in order to really talk about it, tell our stories, we needed to hear our stories and to know what was going on in the community. So it was kind of a give and take. The community was us, we were the community. And, and so we we couldn't respond to, not necessarily respond to the types of issues that Teatro Campesino was born from, that is the plight of the farm worker. But because we were urban. So a lot of our issues centered around Latinos not having access to education, Chicanos who needed to get work, Chicanos in the arts even, and people that were just struggling to exist. And so we told those stories, but we also listened to those stories from our community. So so at that time, because we didn't have a theater, we were poor. We had just started. None of us really had jobs that we could, and that we could support Teatro with, or we didn't have that stake in the community that we do now. So we played in parks, we played people's backyards, we played at functions, we played at the universities and the colleges and the schools to get the word out. And that was important. That was important to our history. And it really created a community within and without Teatro, without the walls of Teatro, if you will. And so soon enough, we were able to get it together to get a theater, the bricks and mortar. And then now we're in a wonderful, wonderful location here at the Civic Theater. So it's quite a journey and quite a challenge and struggle, and a good one. I think it was a good one, yeah.
It sounds like a good one.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you kind of stepped foot into the inside of this building to have this theater, because you were doing stuff in parks and, community events, but what was it like to have
When we were able to open these doors, and I remember my first time walking into this theater, the community theater. We've been to this building before because it was, very well known. But to walk in and know that this was a place that was not just ours, but part of the community. We were home. We were in the West Side. We were back to our roots, if you will. And to step on the stage, it was such an emotional moment because it had been so long. I think it was like almost 36 years or 40 years for me to finally be in a place where we had a backstage, we had dressing rooms, we had a lot of seats for people to sit in and be comfortable in, and we had a reception area and all of that. We were always legitimate, but it was more of like, we have a home. And we have a place where younger people after us, other Chicanos who wanted to be in theater, would learn how to be technicians. They had a place where they could learn how to be technicians with the sound, with lights. Young actors or young, old actors who wanted stage experience, had legitimate stage experience in a place that could support them. And so we had a place where we could grow. And it's been like that. That thrill never goes away. That thrill doesn't go away of coming here and seeing what we can do with this space is amazing.
I think it's also amazing when I learned about this theater. Maybe I'm just not like super well cultured in arts and theater, but it's always been hard for me to find plays centered around, one, like Hispanic, Latino, Chicano issues, and two, with Hispanic, Latino, Chicano faces. And to me, it's a big deal, How does that make you feel to like have those voices, those issues amplified in like tangible ways for people to see what's going on?
What I love about Su Teatro and being here in the theater and putting on shows is that many of our shows, written, of course, by Tony Garcia or by other Chicano theater writers, playwrights, we can relate to whoever's sitting in these seats. And I hear it every time I'm out there greeting them after the show. Always, every night, without fail, I will hear someone say, "You reminded me of my tia." Oh, that story is my story. My grandfather told me those stories before. Oh, this is my story. So in any of those stories, we put on, for example, plays that other writers wrote, like Rudolfo Naya did Bless Mi Ultima. We produced Bless Mi Ultima, and people knew that story because they read that novel by this very, very well-known author, and Tony was able to adapt, to put it on. And people would relate to that. That was their story, whether they were from New Mexico or not. It was their story of their people. So that's what makes this so magical for me, so relevant to me as an actor, as a Latina, Chicana. That means something to me. So I'm not just, let's put on a play. It's our story. And that's what just pumps us up, I think, so much.
You almost made me cry when you.
I know. It makes me cry too when I think about it, because very often we see audience members in tears because it hits them right there in their hearts and in their memories of people that no longer are here, our ancestors. And so when you know that you've touched their hearts, when you know that you've kind of hit on a memory for them that is so precious, gosh, it makes it all worth it. And you can go out and say, yes, I'm glad I have this gift. I am so blessed to be able to be producing, to be able to share our stories. And what a gift that even at this age, all the years I've been doing this, it still feels like the first time.
How do you feel? I'm curious if that feeling changes when someone does come up to you and says, "Oh my gosh, that reminded me of my tia or my abuela. I went through this as a kid." How do you feel when you're having those conversations?
It feels very precious, very sacred, because they're allowing me to know them, to share something with them that is very personal, that I was able to characterize somebody that meant something to them or that hit them in a certain way. It wasn't just a cookie cutter kind of stereotype of role of portraying the tia or an abuela or whatever, that I was given a gift to actually touch their hearts and to do that. And it makes me feel blessed. It makes me feel blessed. Yeah, I'm very proud. Yeah.
That's a strong feeling.
I know, that almost makes me cry. I remember when we were doing Bless Me Ultima, I loved that character, and I waited 30 years to play that character. And so I felt very honored. And I remember almost every night after the show when people would go by and congratulate us and say what a wonderful, whatever they felt about the show. But people would come up and ask me to bless them, that my character, Ultima, could bless them. And at first I was embarrassed and I was like, oh, how dare they? That's kind of sacrilegious. Then I thought about it, and someone one of the actors in the dressing room, she told me, I think that's a privilege. I think that's something that it's not about you. It's about the character and how they felt, what that meant to them. And so I would just say, bless you, yeah. So that's powerful.
It's, I think, the connection that makes it powerful, right?
Right, it is the connection. It's what we do in theater is we're storytellers. We're interpreting stories, we're telling stories, and you hope that it makes that connection. You hope that's what we're getting here, that whoever's sitting here paid for their ticket to be entertained, but what they got, hopefully, was to be touched, was to relate, was to find out something or be educated about something they had no clue about. And we do that with many of the shows.
I think the education aspect is also so important because, again, you guys are doing plays on real issues and history that isn't well known, that isn't taught, and so how does that make you feel?
Yeah, for example, the Corrido de Herreria is, or the Corrido del Barrio, I'm sorry, that was the original title of it, but the Corrido del Barrio is about a neighborhood that was basically driven out. They were displaced and they went on to live in other areas. They were bought out and by the city. And so in order for the colleges and universities that are now part of Auraria to exist. And so an interesting story, and I think this is a story that happened so long ago in the 60s that I think people forget that history. They forget, they go to this campus with the University of Colorado, with Metro State University and Community College of Denver and the Auraria campus, no clue about the neighbors, the people that used to live there, this community. And that's what Corrido del Barrio is about. It is about this community and the people who lived there and what happened afterwards. The wonderful thing about this story is that out of the dissolution, I guess, or out of this whole thing, there was a promise made to the residents that these children, or that the residents and their children would be able to attend college and the universities free. And we worked very hard to have the universities and Metro State University follow up on their promises. And so the descendants of the Irarians who used to live there were able to go to get a college education. Not too many people know that. So that was something that we were able to teach. We also, I think we educate people about how it was that Latinos, Chicanos served in the army, the Vietnam War, because it does take place during that time, and how many of them were drafted, and how many didn't make it back. So it is about that time, about a war that was very unpopular, but that many of our Latinos and our Chicanos fought in. So what did that mean? And how was that relevant, to our history? So yeah, I think our plays, a lot of our plays do try to teach ourselves mainly, and our audiences many of those things that are part of our history, even our Aztec history, the pre-Columbian history. So it's very exciting, I think, to be part of that.
You sound very passionate about the work that you do, but also the impact that it has on people.
Yeah, I am very passionate about being part of Teatro. I don't think I could have lasted 48 years if I weren't. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of the ups and downs of being an actor. It's trying very hard to learn so much. I mean, there's just so much that goes into performing. And as I get older, it's like, okay, am I going to be able to memorize that script in time? And I think but it's such a rewarding experience. And to be in the company of other actors and Chicanos and non-Chicanos. I mean, we have a very diverse cast, and our audiences are diverse. So it really is about sharing our Latino, our Chicano experience, and that's so amazing to me that I'm part of that. I can do that, and I make a difference. And I don't know, I just think that's such a blessing. I keep going back to that word, but it is a blessing to be part of this organization, to be part of the company, to be part of a show. Yeah.
You touched on a little bit about being able to share like the history, the culture, the stories, which makes me think of like all the reasons to celebrate our cultures too. How is that usually incorporated into theater and into the plays here at Teatro, the aspect of celebration?
To me, celebration is about, it's not just enjoying the good things about our culture or about our situation, but really looking at what are the challenges we face, and how resilient we are. And that to me is amazing. And that to me is what we need to keep professing, that we are resilient. We are a strong people. We come from a long, long lineage of warriors, of compassionate people. And I think we need to be proud of that. That's our heritage. And as a Latina, as a Chicana especially, we struggled. I mean, the 70s, I remember the struggles we had with, fighting with or being part of the organizers with the UFW, United Farm Workers Movement, and also demonstrating so that we can heighten the issues that were going on at the time. So it hasn't been easy, but to celebrate that, to celebrate the fact that we never gave up, that there are still things that we need to talk about, that we need to resolve, that we need to face, and that we need to do our homework on. Yeah, so to me, that celebration is still having the energy and the commitment to do that.
Can you share with us an example of maybe it's one play or one issue that speaks to just that, you know, celebrating the resiliency and the not giving up? And is there, I'm sure there are plenty, but you know, what comes to mind?
Quite frankly, I think that the Corrido del Barrio, which is one of the first shows that we're going to be putting on to celebrate the 50th anniversary, does that, as do other shows, does that in terms of how we as, in the show, and I'm referring to we as we who are portraying characters, how we stay together as a neighborhood, how we understand that our community is strong and that we can withstand a lot of the things, and we can still face the injustices that we face, and that's so relevant in this play. We just finished putting on a show called War of the Flowers, which was about the Kitayama strike in Brighton almost 50 years ago as well. And it talks about the strike of these 5 women who were major champions, and they were fighting against the injustices of working in a flower, a carnation warehouse where it was cold, it was damp, the working conditions and the salaries were awful. But these women were so strong to lead the strike against that. And while they didn't win at the time, what they did show is that that's what the movement at the time, the Chicano movement, was born from that and others that were going on at the time in the 60s. And so those kinds of shows that we put on reflect a lot of that struggle that went on in the 60s. And so I think that, I'm losing my train of thought there, I hope you're editing, but anyway, but again, that's why these shows are so important, and what we portray is so important, because I think in every single play there's something there that speaks to our struggle, or something there that speaks to the celebrations of the life that we have as Chicanos. And as I said, I really loved being in War of the Flowers, because it talked about how we took it on in terms of strikes, in terms of demonstrations, the picket lines, all of those things created that movement that we became so familiar with, and that was so important at that time in our history. And also this Corrido del Barrio is an important thing in terms of not forgetting the neighborhood that existed there, and their spirit, the spirit of those people who wanted to, so badly stay there as neighbors, and they were disbanded, and right now, I'm part of that history in terms of having worked at Metro State University for as long as that campus has been in existence. And so there's all these connections with this particular show, because I was part of making that promise be kept as an administrator at Metro. And so it's important to me. And this show is especially personal. It's very personal to me, and a very important part of my history.
Were you born and raised in Colorado too?
I wasn't. I actually, I moved here actually 50 years ago. This is my 50th year here in Denver. My father was military. I grew up mainly in Panama. And when I became an adult, I went to school in the East Coast and lived there for a very, very short time, and decided I wanted to move west young woman, so I moved west. And from the minute I landed in Denver, I just knew this was where I wanted to stay. And I found the people, the compañeros, Tony and my friend Deborah, and all these people that became my family at Su Teatro. And I started working at Metro State University about 50 years ago. I've retired there, but that has kind of made me feel like I feel like I'm a native, but I'm not. I'm just a little bit shy of that.
I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad I know you now.
Thank you, Victoria.
You know,
Thank you.
great person to know, to talk to about these things, and I think the work you're doing through art is amazing. So, thank you.
You're
do you have
welcome.
anything? Yolanda, is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't touched on?
No, not really. I just really appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting Teatro and what I've been able to offer the Teatro and the community has been a blessing. It's just given me life. It really has. Yeah.
You say little, but I hope you know that you contribute a lot to this interview, to this community.
Thank you. Yeah.
You.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.